journey and the experience of the individual organizations our speakers represent today, show ways in which we work and collaborate together, and to discuss anticipated challenges in international education for the future, as well as discuss, if time permits, blended education, tools and abilities students need, new value proposition of schools after the pandemic, differentiated learning, and education for peace and sustainability. Before I introduce our first presenter today, please know that you can submit questions for our question and answer period session through the chat section at any time. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our first distinguished speaker. His name is Norm Dean, and he's the chair of the Alliance for International Education. The Alliance for International Education, AIE, was conceived in 2000 and formally established in 2002 in Geneva. It was formed with the intention of bringing together all those who are interested and involved in the promotion of international education and intercultural understanding so that ideas, research, and practical experience can be shared for the benefit of all. Norm?
Thank you very much, Noreen, for the welcome, and welcome to colleagues on the call today. So it's my pleasure to be here with my colleagues, and I would just like to share with you briefly a brief history of the Alliance for International Education and a little bit of our current thinking. So, Joel, can we please have the first slide up? Thank you. Oops, wrong one.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Not a problem at all.
Been taken, bro.
Okay. Well, I can start anyway. We're waiting for the slide to come up. So the Alliance for International Education, as Noreen just referenced, was created back in fact, 2002 was the first conference that was conducted by the Alliance for International Education back in Geneva, in fact, in 2002. The Alliance, as Noreen said, was, well, there's a statement of purpose just to write on the screen, was created for the purpose of creating a place where conversations could take place in a safe environment to bring together those people who were committed to and interested in basically international education, intercultural understanding, global awareness and social justice through education. So the AIE does not represent a particular individual or group, but it's more a collection of people who've come together to explore these concepts and to create a place where conversations can take place and where ideas can be shared collaboratively. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Sure. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just want to talk briefly about the membership. So we have a board of trustees, which consists of 10 people, which I'll refer to later. But the 10 people represent various constituent groups. They represent international schools and national schools, universities and other institutions that are aligned with our statement of purpose. And we have been very conscious of having not being exclusive, and we've attempted to be very inclusive in terms of who we have represented on the board and who are represented in parts of the conversations that we have. So the national school representation to us is significant and important because we believe it's equally important to make, in terms of equity and justice, to have all schools engaged in conversation around these core concepts. So the board, we meet and we essentially manage the operation of the Alliance, and we're all scattered around the world. So we used to come together twice a year. For the last few years, like everybody else, we've been doing this virtually, but that's who we are. So thanks, George. We'll have the next slide. Thank you. This is just a very brief overview in terms of our legal status. So as an organisation, we are registered with the UK Charity Commission, and you'll see the other elements here, which just are the financial and legal requirements of the Alliance. And we're based in our central bases in the UK through the University of Bath. and the finances and all of those elements are operated through that the NatWest Bank. The finances that we generate are all put back into facilitating conversations. So every dollar, euro, whatever it might be, all the monies that come into the Alliance go back out to support the work that we do. So the trustees obviously don't receive any fee. We all volunteer our time to ensure these conversations can take place. Next slide, thanks, Joel. So again, as Nareen mentioned at the beginning, the idea of the Alliance came from various conversations over various periods of time, and essentially Professors Jeff Thompson and Mary Hayden, who are on our board way back when in 2000, promoted this idea of having the conversations and moving beyond what might have been considered some kind of tokenism at those endpoints of how we acknowledge international education and the things that were done in schools and the ways in which these key elements were recommended or recognised, and identified different ways to do that. So the genesis of the Alliance came from those conversations back in around about 2000, and in 2002, as I say, we got together as an organisation to promote a forum for those conversations to take place. So we go to the next slide, please, Jorg. And over the last 20 years, we've conducted we've conducted 10 conferences over that period of time. Every second year, we've conducted a global conference in various places around the world. As you can see on the slide, I won't read through all of it, but essentially the second slide makes a point that what we think is important is the doing. So we can spend a lot of time talking, and we do spend a lot of time talking, which is valuable in the formation of ideas and the exchange of ideas. But I think an important element to our work is actually in the doing. So there's action that arises from the conversations that we take. We welcome ideas from everybody and everywhere, thinking that the more we bring ideas together, bring different perceptions together, bring differences together, the more we create a more energetic and a better world and a more creative way of dealing with some of the challenges. And of course, the challenges from 2002 are a lot different to what they are in 2022. So we've needed to be continually nimble and reflecting on our practice as we've gone through those things. Partnerships is an important aspect of our relationship with our schools and with the people we work with. We don't do things alone. We like to join up with partners and support and facilitate conversations with groups of people, with schools and with individuals to collectively make a difference. If we could move on to the next slide, please. I'm just conscious of the time. It's just briefly, these are the locations of where we've held our conferences over the last 20 years, sorry. And you can see quickly on the screen there, you can see the themes for each of those conferences. I won't read them, you can see them there. But each conference has a particular theme where we focus on a particular aspect of international education, and we explore that in depth. And we explore that over a period of 2.5 days where we bring together colleagues, and we run particular strands where people engage in a conversation over 2.5 days and a particular element of the theme of the conference. So in 2019 we got together in Geneva, and our conference theme there was, as you can see, Rethinking International Education Values and Relevance. Post that, of course, we've been in COVID ever since, but this particular conference was really important for us because we really grapple with the issues around what is the relevance of international education, what does it look like, what does it mean, what are the values that underpin that. If we can move to the next slide, please, George. And yeah. Okay, and then along came COVID. So we had 2019 and along came COVID. So what we, like many institutions, probably like most, last 2 years, we've actually converted to online, and we've conducted some online seminars this past year. We've conducted 4, and you can see the themes that are on the screen there. And our current theme is Educating for Peace and Social Justice. And our next in-person conference, which we're still looking at what the date for that will be, will focus on educating for peace and social justice. The 4 seminars, we invited a number of colleagues around the world to come and give presentations, and we asked for different views to be presented on those themes, and we spent time in the breakout rooms with debate and discussion taking place and action arising from those particular themes. So at the moment, this is the area that we've been keen to pursue. If we do the next slide, please. Okay. Just in terms of the future viewing, future looking, okay, so in the future, currently what we're now doing is revising our statement of purpose, acknowledging that the world has changed over the last 20 years. Regardless of COVID, it's changed anyway, but certainly COVID has obviously changed things. So we're revising our statement of purpose. We're contextualising our mission, our vision and our values to look at what they were in 2002 and what they need to be in 2022 to continue to be relevant and to challenge ourselves in the way we wish to grow and develop. Reflections on the why, the who, the when and the how as we optimise new ways of engaging. So technology is fantastic and we will need to use that, but at the same time we value the in-person conversation and dialogue that needs to happen as well in our view. And finally, we wish to reaffirm our commitment to educating for peace and social justice. So that is our current theme, or what we wish to pursue in the coming year or two. On to the next slide, very quickly, is just a snapshot of the Board of Trustee members. You'll see if you were to go to our website, you'll find the members of the board there and the various institutions that we all represent. And we're all located, as I said before, around different parts of the world. And the next two slides, I think if you just go through those quickly, George, the next one is actually just our Facebook. We have a Facebook page, and also we have a LinkedIn account as well, where we post activities and forums and discussions. So that's a very quick run through of the Alliance for International Education, where we've come from, where we've been, and what we're looking to do as we move forward into the future. And we're very honoured and privileged to be part of this discussion tonight. So thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Norm. That was very interesting and more to be discussed toward the end. Our next speaker is Faith Abiodun. He's the Executive Director of the United World Colleges International, a global movement that makes education a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and sustainable future. Faith is a member of the Board of Trustees for News Decoder, a global educational news service for young people, partnering with schools and universities around the world to teach journalistic and media literacy that extends students' global horizons, as well as serving on the Board of Trustees for Future Africa. Future Africa was founded to enable long-term political and economic stability in Africa. Faith, welcome.
Thank you very much, Noreen, and thanks all for joining us this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm with United World Colleges, and we were founded in 1962. The very first United World College, UWC of the Atlantic, was founded in Wales by a group of idealistic citizens who had lived through some of the worst of times that humanity's experienced. And I think when you've come on the back of war, you are very keen to build peace. And so the founding documents, the founding nature of UWC was as a movement that sought to make education a force to unite people, to bring people together as a means of building peace in the world. And education obviously has that potential impact for the world and peace. Now, the founders of UWC Atlantic, who had served in the Navy, had served in the armed forces, etc., identified a space where they could really bring people out of the challenges of society. They were looking to take people away from urban areas, take them away from the influences of day-to-day life, and bring them into a space, young people from all parts of the world, initially from around Europe and parts of North America, but increasingly in other parts of the world as well, where that separation from the day-to-day pressures of life could give them the space to see each other and identify the best in each other, and collectively realize that they've got so much in them that can have an impact on the world, and they would be less likely to meet each other on war zones, on the fronts of conflict, if they've spent time getting to know each other. So that value of deliberate international, intercultural understanding, personal awareness has been one of the founding values and ideals of the UWCs to date. So international understanding was at the very foundation of our work, and several other values emerged in the course of a UWC education. So for the first 10 years, UWC was concentrated as Atlantic College in Wales, and then the founders went off through personal alliances, friendships that were forged over generations, went on in different parts of the world seeking to replicate similar ideals of bringing people together into spaces where they can discover each other, work together to create a better future. The second college that was established out of this movement was in Singapore. We established the international Singapore International School in affiliation with UWC in 1971, and then the following year, UWC Pearson College was founded in Canada, and then from there we've grown to now 18 schools and colleges in the world today. We have 6 institutions in Asia, 7 in Europe, 3 in the Americas, 2 in Africa, and hopefully more to come in the future. There also used to be a college in Venezuela, which was open from 1988 up until 2012 when it was shut down by the government. So there has been a lot of growth over time, and UWC continues to expand in its influence and in its reach. I think 2 key things for me to stress at this point will be that educational innovation, first of all, has always been at the heart of what UWC has done. There's always been a desire to understand how we can refine, reform, and transform parts of education to be increasingly relevant on the topics of the day, and to also meet the biggest pioneering of several elements of service education and bringing people closer to society, and service remains a huge core of the UWC educational offering. And deliberate diversity will be the second thing that has been at the core of a UWC education. You would find that on any UWC college or school that you've got students from multiple countries, but beyond the diversity in nationalities, it's the diversity in socioeconomic backgrounds. That really is the thing that sets the UWC education apart. International schools over time have always had, expatriate kids, kids who, who come from upper middle class backgrounds, etc. But when you come through a UWC, that big distinction really is the blending of society across all socioeconomic platforms. And that is really enabled by what remains a unique system of global distribution of the selection process. You've got about 155 national committees in some parts of the world that we only see on maps or hear about in a distance, and you've got local presence, and really that becomes a distinctive factor of the UWC selection process. It's trusting local leaders to identify young people who have shown great potential for leadership, for societal transformation, and recommending them and providing access for them to have a world-class education in parts of the world that they perhaps never dreamt of reaching by themselves. And that blending of society, blending of cultures, blending of ideas and ideologies really helps to bring about peace in the world. On that same point, we have seen people spend time together that would probably never be able to sit next to each other in any other part of the world. One of our patrons, Shelby Davis, who began to support UWC 25 years ago and who perhaps has had more influence on funding for students, talks about the time when he first visited the UWC college in New Mexico in the USA. And he had been invited to attend a cultural evening, having met the head of the college at an event prior to that. And he arrived on the campus a few minutes before the event was supposed to start. So he wandered off by himself, just taking the place in. And he found himself by the edge of a swimming pool where 2 young men were having a conversation. And, the bell rang for dinner or something of the nature. And, the young men stayed behind and they hadn't moved on to go get dinner. So he asked them, why aren't you all, heading off like the other kids just did? And they mentioned that, they were 2 young men from Israel and Palestine, and they were roommates at UWC USA. a reality that would not be possible if they were both at home. And at that time, there was perhaps a bit of aggression in the parts of the world in the Middle East. And they were commenting to each other that if they were back at home, they probably would be trying to kill each other. But here they were on a campus, learning together, sharing space, and seeing the value in the shared humanity. And that was the key for Shelby Davis to decide to commit to this kind of education as what he wants to see perpetuated in the world. And that, for me, is the definition, really, of what a UWC education makes possible. It's bringing people together, helping them see the best in each other. And then through the process of education, we are uniting people, we're uniting nations, we're uniting cultures in order to build a more peaceful and sustainable world. So that connection of education to the needs of society, to the topics of the day, I see as very, very core. We've equally been very deliberate about facilitating access to education for refugees and people from parts of the world that will be thought about as, as extras. And if we can do something for them, we will, but bringing that into the core of what we do, having a dedicated refugee access program for students. And from the beginning of time with UWC, that has always been core to the work that we have done. So if I zoom out of all of that, the values of UWC, and again, I'm sure that Adrian will speak about some of the connections and the work that we're doing on educational innovation, etc. But the values are very, very much linked to what you see on the IB Learner profile, for example, where we're very, very deliberate about the kinds of individuals whom we want to bring about in society, people who are competent, people who are compassionate, people who are curious about society, people who are courageous in how they take risks. Those values of good citizenship and good leadership are the heart of UWC education, such that regardless of one's starting block in life, in the course of education, over and above the academic experience and over and above the qualifications for university and whatever comes next, whatever society, whatever sectors they find themselves in, they've got to be people who are able to be influential in bringing society together and helping to make the world a much better place. And so over the last 5 years, UWC partnered with the Harvard Graduate School of Education, in particular one of its research centers, Project Zero, to take a look at what we have done over time and help us reflect on what we have done that we have found to be most influential across the schools and colleges in developing citizens who are pro-social, who are ethical, who are compassionate, who can have that kind of influence on the world. What exactly is it in our education that we are doing? Because if you meet a UWC alum anywhere in the world, they would say UWC was the best thing that ever happened to them. But how do you codify that? How do you capture it? What exactly is it that happens in the course of a UWC education that inclines people towards making a positive difference in the world? And so this 5-year study was very, very extensive. It featured more than 13,000 people in this survey. And of those 13,000, you had about 4,800 who were current students. So this was a longitudinal study following them at the beginning and the midpoint and the ends of their journeys. You had a good number of people, almost 7,000, who were alumni from various generations, from the first decade all the way through the most recent decades. And they had comparison students, about another 1,800 people who went to similar schools to UWC, or schools that had similar elements in their design. And in the course of this study, that we took away a few big lessons about what exactly it was that we were doing that we found to be most influential in inclining UWC students towards the kind of future that we think they can help to shape. Some of these things are not rocket science. They're not massively new to anyone who's worked in education, but they reflect to us that the things we're deliberate about designing were actually having the impact that we thought they would have. So, for example, you have people reflecting on the discussion-based pedagogy that's at the heart of the way of teaching at UWC. They're saying that was influential. I had voice. If you've brought someone from Venezuela, you put them in a classroom with kids from Singapore and Bolivia, there's a chance that one or two.
Okay. Unfortunately, Faith has.
So,
I'm
I
sure
see.
you're.
Did I drop off for a second? I'll bring this to a close. I think that the sense within the study was that there were elements of the design of space. People commented a lot about being able to share spaces together and the deliberate diversity they found to be one of the core elements that made a UWC education very, very influential. People talked about the fact that they had access to service education as a thing again that inclined them towards being deliberately diverse and being, better for society. People talked about autonomous learning. The fact that at UWC you have a chance to shape a lot of what it is that you learn, that element itself was very, very influential. But above all else, our community reminded us of the need to embed sustainability more deliberately in our teaching and practice. They said, look, sustainability is right there in your mission statement, but every time we look at the work that we do as an institution, as much as we have done in teaching, as much as we have done in carbon offsetting, as much as we have done in elevating the voices of people from different parts of the world, there was still a reminder that we had more to do in embedding sustainability more clearly in the work that we do. So I thought I'll introduce it as well as one of those connections to the dominant needs of the day, that as we reflect on our history, we also reflect on how we are currently positioned to address the dominant needs of the day. And the climate crisis will be one of those that stop on people's minds, as well as addressing social inequalities in the world and how we continue to adapt our educational model and our delivery to reflect that we are in touch with the needs of the day and we can help to shape the future. So there's a lot to share, and I hope that in the Q&A we can draw a few more of these insights out, but that gives you a flavor of what UWC education is all about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Faith. That was very interesting. Our next distinguished speaker is Adrian Carney. He's the director of IB World Schools at the International Baccalaureate. The IBWS department has a global remit to support all authorized schools in achieving their optimum teaching, learning, and assessment objectives. He's joined the IB in 2009 as a regional director for Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, and was promoted to IBWS director when the department launched it in 2017. And prior to joining the IB, he was also he held a senior position at Cambridge English, a department of the University of Cambridge. Adrian?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nareen, for that introduction. And I think in short, I've spent my whole working life within international education. And I'm delighted to be with not just partners, but friends here in terms of, sharing our kind of common commitment in terms of education and innovation. And it's a strong partnership between schools as partners. And we've heard from Faith and the United World College movement, the colleges, and we'll talk a bit about the synergy and the ISA schools as well, in terms of a history that really goes back in terms of humanity commitment and how to bring the best out of international education. And so it's about impact, and with the Alliance of International Education, a strong and rigorous research background and that real directness there, because across everything we do, it's the impact, but also the rigor in which it's done. So a commitment to standards, but also inclusivity. I think Jorge is going to share the presentation, or I can share it if that's preferred. Yeah, Jorge, do you want to kind of share the presentation? And what I'd like to do is give some key points and highlights, and then as Faith is saying, we can dive into some of the detail.
What is best for you, Adrian? What is best for you?
Okay, so what I'll do is I will drive. I think no, I can't share it. So I can't share easily from it. So if you could put up the presentation,
Sure.
And we'll and then
Sure. Give me a minute.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the IB, just in terms of, what does the IB do? We'll talk a bit about some of the history and connections, but the IB really kind of stands on, providing curriculum, and that is done. If you can take us to the next slide, please. This is what I look like with a beard. Today I'm not wearing one, but just like I'm just as committed with or without a beard, so don't worry there. But if we just go back one slide, Jorge, and then I just want to make a few points here. So what does the IB do? Then you're really thinking about, and this is where we're talking about community and a peer-to-peer and the educators worldwide. So with our colleagues, it's the development of curriculum, it's professional development, it's assessment, right? But also the work that we do with schools, not only in terms of the standards and practices, but the support for them in terms of evaluation and program development. So, and the work with our schools and educators worldwide. So I think one of the themes, and going on to the next slide, is about ecosystems. So I think one of the points I want to make here, be it UWC, ISA, the IB schools, we're each school is an individual ecosystem and they fit in with other ecosystems. And that I think is very, very exciting because it helps to bring together the diversity and context within, the need and situation we are, with how that links up with other big international themes and the ability to share experience and practice and really talk at the bigger level, which is something that I think we want to sort of explore. And I want to, recognize within that ecosystem the IB schools and their commitment, and the IB educators as contributing to that learning community, and the IB associations and networks that help to provide that gelling connection, which blends the global with the kind of contextual. And the team, I work with, the IB World School team, is really looking after the needs of all the schools post-authorization worldwide, particularly related to evaluation. And evaluation, in terms of schools being evaluated, has really shifted towards not just, are you doing it? Are you compliant? But the big shift is, where are you going? What's the direction? What's the feed forward? How can we, you heard Faith there in terms of the innovation and change, right? How can we innovate? How can we pilot? How can we develop? How can we co-create and move forward together to continue to reimagine and take things forward? So, there's a number of initiatives there, and the team of IB World School managers, my colleagues, provide that professional connection with all schools worldwide to support individual schools, but also the wider communities as well. So we really enjoy what we do within that diversity. Next slide, and maybe go on to the mission slide, Jorge, which is 2 slides across. Yeah. So I just want to connect the one back, please, the mission. We heard, I think from Faith and from Norm in terms of their mission commitments. A couple of things I want to point out here is the IB mission. We're talking about young people, so all of this, the learners at the center, of the curriculum, and the learner for all of us is the center of what we do. And I think if we all keep focused on the learner, we'll always be kind of straight. So from the learner, inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring. And then, the common commitment you'll hear very strongly from all of us is, how does that translate to, the world, the humanity, to sustainability, to a better and more peaceful world? So the dialogues that we can have and are trying to nurture within our communities are very important, and that balance with challenging programs and rigorous assessment. So you have the standards, but then you have the scaffolding and support for all learners. I would say, I'll talk a bit about the IB Director General, Olli-Pekka Heinonen, but his point when he was discussing the mission when he joined the organization was, the IB's mission is not the answer, it's the question. It's the question for all of us. And I think probably we all feel like that in terms of this is the challenge, this is what is relevant. How do we address that within the current challenges of wherever we are in the world, right? And I think that's what's super engaging in terms of that perpetual commitment. Moving on to the next slide, please. So the IB then, we all kind of grew up in a similar time, really dates back formally to 1968. And as we've heard in terms of thinking about the 2 great wars of the last century, in terms of that post-conflict need, in terms of peace and the role of education to help those dialogues. So the first curriculum worked on in the diploma was the international history curriculum, and it built up from there. And the IB has always been an international organization. Its bedrock was those international schools worldwide, and that gave it a particular perspective. And also with organizations like ISA, you have that commitment, and also the need for international mobility. I think the ISA dates back to the 1950s as the world started to, change and develop and start to move around, and trying to provide quality, consistent education that could be, was available worldwide, so students could transfer. So you can see there the numbers and then the sort of the transformation. I think one thing I would point out that of now the 5,500 IB schools, I think it's worth noting that more than 45% of those schools are state schools, right? They're state-funded schools in a whole range of countries and contexts, as well as having private schools. So it's an interesting and diverse community from that perspective. So we have, public school projects from, Costa Rica, Peru, through to UK, Spain, Japan, Malaysia. There's a lot there in terms of the programs, as well as supporting many kind of private-based schools in terms of achieving their objectives as well. Let's move on. So just very briefly, the IB's Director General, Olli-Pekka Heinonen, I think he's interesting for lots of reasons, but I think one of the reasons why he's interesting in terms of his deep thought about where we need to go within this world. Former Minister of Education, Finland. So I think, you think about quality and systems and that reputational build. So I think he brings a tremendous amount. And you can see here, just pulling out some of his thoughts about the world and the challenges we face, right? So we've had COVID, the war in Ukraine, but the interconnected and independent world. So, we can't rely on a small elite to solve all of these problems, right? It's really about the form of education, the transdisciplinarity, the reflectiveness, the thoughtfulness within all of our education that is trying to provide learners who are excited to impact the world and work better. And I love this. We need to connect our heads with our hearts and our hands. So, and we as humans need to maintain our agency in terms of what are those ethical, sustainable decisions and balance our creativity with the impact and think about society. So that's a big task for us all. But I think it's something that's ever kind of relevant. Right, moving on. Next slide. Just to pull out, I think something that the IB would say, but I think many of the organizations would say that we're committed towards empowering learners and providing agency for our learners in the different contexts in which we work. So, the personalization of learning experience. Really thinking about the learner's whole being, helping to build their confidence and purpose, as well as skills and knowledge, and reflecting not just reflecting, but celebrating the cultural kind of diversity and multiculturalism within our schools and our networks and the world as a whole. So I think that's the focus on the learner and the direction, and that helps to say that's the output, that's what we're trying to support. Next slide, please. I'll just say a brief word about COVID, and I think we would all agree, be you educators or parents or students yourselves as part of this audience, that COVID was a very tough teacher. Let's put it this way. We had to do things differently, and from March, April 2020, essentially education systems worldwide were closed for face-to-face schooling, and we all had to really think about how we innovated and supported students who were deeply impacted. And I'm not saying that that impact is all over with. We need to continue to support our students, but that was a very deep point where we need to think about how we improve access to learning and what we can learn from it. Next slide, please. We surveyed schools in September 2021 about their experience through COVID. And what we saw is that only of the IB schools that were surveyed, right, only 4% remained open through the pandemic. So you've got vast majority kind of closed. And the other figure, which I think is interesting, is the 99% of programs provided remote online kind of digital teaching. The PYP programs and the primary schools needed and were able to and supported their learners also through physical packs and more engagement, because they needed to think differently about those kind of younger learners. But I want to commend all of the schools and educators that supported schools through that situation. And the next point is, what have we learned from that, and what have we learned about school support and going forward? In the next slide, you'll see that we've been supporting our schools through a number of ways. partly through a crisis support framework, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment, but also here we've been supporting schools through financially through a COVID fund. So, you know, schools have been able to apply for financial relief where they've hit issues, because quite devastating. I mean, very disruptive for the families and for the parents, etc., to try and ensure that we sustain the school, sustain the education and all of the commitment made through the years. In the next slide, you'll see that, and this is available, the crisis support framework, the resources, the materials are available on the IB website for all. And, you know, these curated resources really about helping us all to have the dialogues regarding, you know, the challenging conversations where we're seeing change and tension, help provide the safe spaces and support the conversations so that we can have those dialogues, you know, sensitively. The next slide, thank you, Jorge. So another thing we've learned and we've been publishing for our schools is more support around student well-being. I mean, we are still in something, I would say, of a well-being crisis, and we're thinking more and more about this. So, you know, the resources that we provided, but we're really interested in working with our partners in schools and how we can further communities to help share practice and deepen good well-being practice so that schools are safe, students are supported. But, you know, this is one of the post-COVID sort of hanging things. In the next slide, you'll also see that we're developing more learning resources for our schools. And, you know, I think maybe later in the Q&A, I can say a little bit about the importance of teachers and professional development, because I think we also want to innovate there. Teachers have been dramatically impacted by COVID. I mean, they talk in the US about the Great Resignation, you know, in terms of teachers, the challenges of teachers traveling and connecting. So, you know, that's something that's very much on our agenda for the future. Jorge, if we could move forward to the slide on innovations and enhancements. And, you know, there are 3 areas that I just want to signal at this point that, you know, in terms of the diploma program review, in terms of looking at how that will further innovate our work in terms of online teaching, and also we're reviewing the middle years program as well, so that that is optimum and there's a clearer connection between the MYP and the DP. Next slide, please. So I would just say, yep, and so, you know, the diploma program is, if you like, the flagship program of the IB when people think about it. But of course, we're actually providing curriculum and support for schools from, you know, age 3 right through to the end of diploma. So there's the full continuum of education. But the diploma is, you know, a unique and powerful qualification that's recognized worldwide. If we go to the next slide, you can see the challenge. I mean, in a way, this seminar, you know, thinking about the balance between education and the world and the impact. And what we've been asking ourselves is, as we construct this diploma program review, you know, are we being bold enough in terms of empowering young people to actually do what we've said in the mission to make a better and more peaceful world? So really looking at the agency within the program, thinking about the pathways within it, as well as sort of innovating in terms of ensuring that, for example, with, you know, digital portfolios and new ways in terms of thinking about sort of assessment. Next slide, please. So, you know, the diploma program review in terms of the innovation. So we're really looking at, you know, 3 things. One is, you know, thinking about the whole, you know, the curriculum and continuity from, you know, PYP right through to the diploma, and particularly the articulation between MYP and DP in terms of knowledge, skills and competencies. Thinking about the pathways and choice and how those can be optimized in terms of thinking about students and their needs. And then looking at new ways of assessing and evidencing, because that's changing really dramatically. So, you know, as I've said, you know, thinking about portfolios, how evidencing can be done, working more digitally in the way that assessment and evidence can be captured are some of the themes within that review. And we're working with many of our schools in these DP review areas, including, you know, the United World Colleges. Next. One of the points I think Faith was making, sorry, just before I come to this slide, one of the points Faith was making was regarding access as well, and how we can increase access to students perhaps unable to attend regular school. So, you know,
Es algo de Madrid, esto de está Jaime García.
I think I'm joined by a colleague who's we've launched a pilot to really investigate how the diploma program could be taught fully online. And part of that is really to think about how students outside of regular school could access the program. So that's an interesting innovation. So we're really trying to think through the sort of access to technology and innovation. And then we come to, you know, the closing part here regarding hope. And one of the initiatives that the Director General has sort of launched relates to the Festival of Hope. And I think just closing with this point that all of you know that, you know, when it came to Pandora's box, you know, when it was opened, all of these terrible things came out, but hope remained. So the IB with partners, and this is really an invitation to everyone here to engage in the Festival of Hope in terms of that sort of aspiration and connectedness between young people, scientists, spiritual leaders, and others in terms of a new type of dialogue. So if we just move on, Jorge, to the last slide, please. You know, this will be a blend of students that work within schools, but also, you know, the dialogue and work between different leaders and contributors, not just only within the field of education, but there's more information, and we really would like your active engagement in this. And you can see the web address there if you'd like to know more or to sign up for mailing to learn more about it. But that's just an update in terms of where we've been, where we are, and some thoughts about the future, and happy to kind of explore these with you further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. A lot of food for thought and a lot of interesting innovations throughout the three presentations this morning. Now, we'd like to turn it over to Edgardo Manzidi, who's the Secretary General of the International Schools Association. As some of you may know, the International Schools Association was founded under Swiss law in 1951, and it's the most senior organization in the world of international education. And it is a non-governmental organization and the first educational NGO to be granted consultative status with UNESCO. Edgardo is also director of the Belgrano campus, Director of Strategy and Finances, and a member of the governing board at St. Catherine's Moreland School in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Edgardo.
Thank you very much, Narine, and thank you, Faith, Norman, and Adrian for those amazing presentations. I will try to be brief in order to go to the discussion, and I think the best part of this event today to discuss where we are now and what we are going to, where we're going to in the future in international education. A lot of thoughts about what Faith said about access to international education, what Norm was saying about how we are giving our teachers the teacher training, and what Adrian and the IB is doing, that it's amazing. Just to be brief, Jorge, if you can put the brief presentation, just to, as Narine was saying, we were created in 1951. Last year, we celebrated our 70th anniversary. As you can see there, in 1960s, there were around of 50 self-declared international schools. And the idea of ISA was thought to give some answer to those sons and daughters of diplomats and think what will happen after the Second World War and how we can build a world in peace. That's why we afterwards developed the ISA Curriculum Framework for Peace and Sustainability, that I think that is now very relevant, even if it was thought 70 years ago, it is relevant today. So in that sense, I've been working at ISA for 10 years, my mother for 30 years, and also my grandmother. I came from a family of education. That's why I've been in education since I was little. And what amazed me about ISA is the connections, and as Adrian was saying, how we all were born together at the same time. ISA started the first pilot of the NYP. Then we also have a lot of people, for example, Mary Hayden, that are in the Alliance for International Education that also worked in ISA. That's why we are very connected, and we thought that this would be a great event to see how we can collaborate and how we can give more services to students and also to parents. What we try to be a collaborator in the international education sector, and to cater the needs of universities, the needs of parents, the needs of students that want to move in different parts of the world. So as you can see, we have 12 board members from different parts of the world. We have schools in the 5 continents, and what we try to do is to help schools, maybe very little schools and independent schools that are starting, to give them the international mindset and to start thinking outside their community, outside their country, and outside their continent, and how they can start internationalizing their school. So we have a self-study guide. Okay, we can go to the next one. We have a self-study guide in order for the school to start thinking, if they do not have, if we talk about access, the money and the different resources to have a very large international curriculum, but how they can start with very little experiences, and to change the mindset of the community, of the parents, and of the teachers. What we believe in peace, in freedom, in the celebration of diversity and similarities, tolerance and equality. And what we think is that in our activities, actually they are an excuse for bringing students and teachers together, because when we saw that with the pandemic, that we started doing a lot of the things online, when we saw that students from Turkey explained their situation in the country to students of Colombia and vice versa, the ISA poetry contest was just an excuse for them to understand what was happening in the world, and to understand that the ambitions and the problems and the fears that a 13-year-old may have in Turkey is the same that a 13-year-old may have in Colombia, in Japan, in Spain, in Australia. So the idea of ISA is to create these quality experiences, and to promote these values of international mindset that maybe sometimes are sometimes schools or teachers or maybe the international community have their own thoughts about what is internationalism. And that's, if we can go to the next one, Jorge, that's why we try to ask children what was internationalism for them, and we created a short film festival in order to attack that issue from different parts, from the art parts of view, and then from the science point of view, and the students say, well, what is internationalism to me? Because for me, is what I've been taught in the Western world. For other people, is what they've been taught in the Eastern world. So the idea is to bring that together and see that in the end, similarities and differences enrich the debate and enrich the conversation, instead of thinking everyone and all the people in the same way. So a little bit about the objective that we have is as the other organizations were saying, to further world peace and understanding through education, to encourage the creation of new international schools, the cooperation among international minded schools, and undertake the studies related to internationalism in schools, to nurture the interest in national schools of international matters, and to encourage global citizenship and responsibilities related to environmental sustainability. That was what Adrian was saying about, if we are giving the tools to our students, and if they are prepared to really think and be present in this new world. Jorge, if you can go to the next one, please. So a little bit about our activities. Next one, please. is what I was saying. This was what I was saying about the competitions and the activities. We have joint projects where each school can host. We base them in the UN because we have a strong connection with the UN. We have a permanent representative that is Narine at New York and a permanent representative that in Geneva, as we have 3 honorary member schools, that is United Nations International School, the Ecolint International School in Geneva, and the Yokohama International School in Japan. So the idea of this joint project is that each school can host it and can give those international days, International Jazz Day, International the UN Day, the International Peace Day, can give their own impronta to these days, and then the other schools can collaborate and they can join in this joint project. And each year we have different international days and different hosts, so that's enrich what is the thinking of an International Jazz Day, for example, in Ecuador or in other parts of the world, and how they celebrate that day. Our special and I think main event is the Youth Leadership Encounter. As you can see, for 2 years we didn't have the in-person meeting. So this year, after 2019, that was celebrated in Castellón about artificial intelligence, we tried to move the event in different parts of the world and continents in order to the whole schools that we have around 50 schools in different parts of the world can attend. This year it would be in Lecco in Milan in Italy in a month's time about world climate justice. And we've been working with this in a virtual mode from last year to this year. And we have around 100 students from Nepal, Brazil, Argentina, Spain, Russia. So the idea is to bring those kids together and try to think what is the climate justice and how we can address this theme right now, and how we can make how we can make our voices being heard, with like Greta Thunberg as maybe a role model for the kids that is very near their age. And of course the idea is to bring these kids together and show them what is the public sector doing, the companies are doing for sustainability, what is the government of Milan is doing for sustainability, and then what institutions are doing for sustainability, international institutions, so they can have the whole picture, you know, what they are doing and how they can collaborate in that doing, what they are doing, what projects they are doing in their schools, what climate change is affecting them in their communities, and how they are addressing that. Then we have also the Distinguished Service Award and Humanism Award for different personalities that contribute in education all around the world, and that's very important for us, because in order to recognize these people that worked in education and they are making a change in the world. Jorge, next one, please. So we have partners and colleagues all over the world, but the partners that we have now are WAFUNA, that is the World Federation of United Nations Associations, that we participate in their online model of United Nations, and that also is very important for kids to understand what is being discussed. They are one of the organizations that try to reflect what is the UN really, and how they operate with consensus, and it's very similar to reality. We have a partnership with Eco Schools, the Foundation for Environmental Education, and with University of Stenden, the Netherlands. That is a very important partnership, because the students that they are doing their programs in international teaching for secondary and for primary can do their practices in ISA schools. Sometimes for international schools it's very difficult to bring teachers from abroad, and this is a very great opportunity for having teachers that or almost teachers that can go to your school for free and motivate the local teachers, and also have a teaching experience and a best practice between them for a period of time. And also what we try to do with these exchanges also with teachers and students is try to give the students the opportunity, maybe students from Mexico, Colombia, or Argentina, that is very hard to them to travel abroad and pay for a tuition fee in a school in Europe. What we try to do is to partner with our schools that are part of the ISA network and try to have the access to that education with not so high fees, and to be accessible for them, and also for teachers that want to continue developing their training in different parts of the world and to learn different international curriculums or national curriculums. That also we do. Jorge, next one, please. Yes, I think that what abilities and tools that our students are needing, global citizenship is one of them, and it's the one that we try from ISA to nurture and to give. Also the communication, the creativity, the time management, and the flexibility. But I think that what we are trying from ISA to give out to our students within these activities is the global citizenship and the responsibility in the world. And as Oli-Pekka was saying, that everything is connected. What is happening in Russia with the war in Ukraine, what happened with COVID, everything is interdependent and interconnected. And what happened in each part of the world may affect you and the students now. Next one, please, Jorge. Well, this is just becoming a member. This then you can see that on the website. But just to finish this part of the session is that what we try to do is to nurture our collaborative partnerships with the IB, with the United World Colleges, and with the Alliance for International Education that have been doing a lot of work, and try to, the four of these organizations, try to see how we can collaborate together, where we are better at and can give a lot of tools to the students, and how we can do things together in order to have a better world, and a world really that is thinking in the education for peace and education for sustainability, because I think that is the future, and how we can give the students the protagonism for them also to do their student journey, and how they want to be taught, and what subjects and what career they want to do, and not to impose that to them, and they to have a voice. So thank you, Nareen, for that, and let's hope to be open to the discussion and have a lot of questions and try to together co-create and think where we're going in international education for the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Edgardo. Now we have reached our question and answer period, and I see only one question so far, which I will share with you. It's kind of quite interesting to me, and this is the issue that we have this forum to really discuss from different perspectives around the world. Someone has submitted a question, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Good afternoon, everyone. Today I can see how many students are having problems with the new law in Spain regarding books, preparation, and even health problems related to the pandemic. What do you think we can do to improve results in students, as I see that there are new methodologies like projects motivation, Montessori, ? What is your advice for an entrepreneur like me? I would love to collaborate, so can you tell me, please, how to do it from Madrid?" It's a big, long question, but I think there is quite a bit there. And I see the gentleman who submitted the question nodding his head.
Sorry for the length.
No, it's quite interesting. Would anyone like to tackle that or some part of that question? Maybe in terms of how to improve results in students and how, different countries have different policies, educational policies, and how can you overcome that in a different perspective than what we see here.
Adrian?
Yeah,
Adrian?
maybe I can. Yeah, thank you. Maybe I can say a few things, and my colleagues can kind of add to it. It's a really interesting question, and regarding the books, the materials, and also the point about entrepreneurship. So I think when you're looking at, say, IB programs and the way that schools work with us, the curriculum, it's not transactional. It's not, here is the book, take it to the classes, teach it, and if the students don't have the book, then they can't function. So I think what's powerful is the role of the IB coordinator within the school and the notion of the transdisciplinarity within the way that the teachers work in terms of the development of the resources and the support for the students. And then that allows, in a way, it's not about the book, it's about the local resources that they can draw on within that kind of experience. So that allows the education to be kind of adapted in many different settings. You have be it the PYP with the exhibition, with the MYP with the personal project, or the extended essay with the diploma, the student has the opportunity to focus on the things which interest them, to get into some detail there and really showcase it, right? And I think this ties into your points about entrepreneurship. So, where students go into depth, work in projects, and working with others in terms of, how they're working on product design, the methodology, so the outputs are somewhat different. And I think they're very aligned to creativity, entrepreneurship, and the practical steps of how do you go from conceptual idea into creating something, then reflecting what you've created academically. So with the MYP, there's the project with a high degree of agency as to what that is. And then the student is also writing a substantial report reflecting on that sort of academically. So it blends the rigor of it. Is there more that we can do and what's the direction? Absolutely. I think to your question, I think we in the IB, in terms of future, would like to see the strand, if you like, in terms of student voice and agency be louder in what we do. You can hear it in the curriculum and how we can partner with schools within that. And it's the, how do we showcase that innovation, right? How do we connect the schools and those very bright, that talent in the MYP and DP years into other areas so they can be connected and taken further forward? And one avenue to bring these conversations is going to be the Festival of Hope, which will help that kind of connectedness, which I referenced earlier. But it's a great question. The last point I will make is, thinking about entrepreneurship and the direction. Many people will say, that how many, I've had one career in international education. How many careers? What portfolio of careers will our students have? And there's this whole theme that, the future of work is learning and it's adapting, and it's kind of all of that synthesis. So I think together as partners, what we're trying to do is provide the skills, the attributes, and the knowledge and confidence that they can be entrepreneurial and they can succeed in failing, in the sense of they can try things out, be resilient, and keep trying and find that environment. But I think in Spain, we have more than 120 schools. There are a lot of associations. There's an ecosystem there. It's well recognized within the university system. And, I am happy to have an offline conversation within Spain and introduce you to people as well to kind of help. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Faith and Norm?
I'm sorry,
Faith,
Norm?
Faith had his hand up first. Okay.
Thanks. I'll just reference a little bit on my thoughts on this health side of just well-being generally, and this is a crisis beyond what many of us would have imagined might be happening. So I assume that was also part of the thoughts coming out in your question there. Not as though we have figured it out or anyone has figured it out. We are learning on the go. There are, on the one hand, stresses that might be linked to the academic program, space, etc. And on the other hand, there are pre-existing conditions that seem to be surfacing a lot more in young people, mental health challenges, etc. So as a group of institutions, we are aware of the varying stresses and challenges the young people face as they go through education. From the study that we conducted that I referenced earlier with Harvard, one of the things that came out very clearly was the need for us to develop a lot of processes to support people by building a sense of belonging. And there are things that exist in the way we have designed spaces, designed outdoor education, created a sense of agency for young people, and Adrian mentioned that as well. The agency is super important. As much as you can include a bit of autonomy, when students feel as though they're consumers of education that's been designed by someone else, that detachment and frustration builds in. If they feel as though they're co-creators of the experience, it does something for the mind. It switches something up in them that allows them to be a bit more engaged, a bit more interested, a bit more excited. So as you think in the work that you're doing as an entrepreneur in education, how much can you embed agency, engagement, autonomy for students so that they are co-creators of their own experiences and not simply consumers, while obviously providing sufficient mental health support and psychological support and access to proper medical care. You can't overinvest in that, to be honest. But just as a tactic would be to think about how to enable the young leaders to be co-creators of their own experience. You might achieve something with that.
If I can just add quickly, I think what Adrian and Faith have said, I would concur with 100%. And my only other comment would be looking at the question. What can we do to improve results in students? I think we might need to redefine what we mean by results. Because if we're looking at just a very narrow result, focus of academic result, then that's a different question to me than the totality of the human experience and the human being, and what do we mean by a result for the human being. So I think it's important that we think about the concepts, the language, and just to finish off, I think student voice, student agency, I think community, I think, is the key, and I think it's the key to everything, really, and providing a safe community for learners to learn and to make the mistakes that Adrian spoke about. I think that's really critical at any time, but particularly in this time. I think that's going to be really critical. So, yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. I have another question from another guest. It says, how would you differentiate an international education from a traditional one with the current global climate, online learning, and the movement towards more tribal societies as new environments are being created? What advice would you give to students or learners?
Would you like me to kick off again?
Please.
With some initial thoughts. I mean, these questions are amazing. I think we should have said, what questions do we think will be asked? And I think you're really stretching us in terms of the challenge. So I'm trying to think about how to address this question. I think one thing to say, the question asking, about, national education versus international education. I think one thing that we should say is that we're not looking down on national education. There are many, many national education systems of high quality, which, do a fantastic job, and we can learn from those practices as well. It's not that, but international education also brings, because of the diversity and the connectedness, so, Norm's point about community and the different levels of community and connectedness is really powerful. And, if you're thinking about education, I'm from the UK, and I went through a kind of standard comprehensive school in the UK. And, in terms of national education, it was the factory model. you know, and it was trying to say, you're given material, you're assessed against the material, the level of creativity is limited, right? And you're expected to follow, you know, expectations are set and you go into a particular sort of pathway, which is fine. But then the diversity and change in all the world means, well, that's only a partial fit and doesn't really, you know, one thing I'd say.
That would like to start.
Sorry?
I don't know where that came from.
Was that? No, it's okay. I mean, if people want to join in and ask questions, that's fine. So I would say, you know, so I think one of the differences is we're actively cultivating within the students both the knowledge, the skills, and the attributes. Now you get to this point regarding you mentioning tribal. So I think,
Yes.
you know, a very important thing to say is that this starts with the learner, their own identity, their own language, and their own culture. And that needs to be nurtured, developed, and celebrated. It's kind of like from that, and then the value add, if you like, is really the bridge to the international through languages, through that more reflective approach in terms of studies, through an approach that says others who are different may also be right, or we could be, you know, it's that kind of openness to dialogue, which, you know, what we're trying to do in terms of a more peaceful world is say, let's just have that constructive dialogue and have a frame in which that can be done and bring our own attributes to it. So that would be my just skating on the surface of what is a very deep question.
Yes, I agree, Adrian. And also I'm thinking about, in order to open their eyes, sometimes we have to merge national, for example, in this country, national and international curriculum, and try to make an enriching curriculum from the international curriculum's point of view. And it's just to give them, when they travel, if they have the possibility and the privilege to travel, is to understand that, as you were saying, in other parts of the world, people may be right or wrong, but it's different. And it's not right or wrong, it's just different. And you have to accept that in order to embrace the differences and similarities, and to understand that there's not only one culture, there's not only one religion, there's not only one tribal community, but there are lots of them, and we have to live in one world. So I think that in order to address that is just to open the eyes of the community and say, okay, this is much bigger than just my community or my country or even my continent. It's much more broad. And when I have to put my enterprise or travel or maybe the person that answer the phone and give me services for the phone company is not based here where I live, it's based abroad, and I have to understand another time difference, another language, another and I think that's the richness of international education to embrace that. And you cannot, I don't agree with a lot of things, but I just need to know that they exist and they understand and accept them. Because if you do not know that they exist, how you can have that conversation? And I think that in that case, what we need to show is to see we all are here in this international community. We have these variations of communities, and we need to merge that together. So how we are going to do that if we do not know that? So I think that for the student, the knowledge and to open their eyes, and also for the parents to understand that, I think that's very important in order to, I think that international education can enrich and broaden the national curriculums that sometimes are very like a partial action, as you were saying, Adrian, of the whole picture.
Yeah, I also think it's about instilling in all of us, actually, not just our students, but all of us, the capacity to ask the question about what am I missing? Because what I have to understand is that because of my life, my experience, I bring with me baggage. I do. I can't help that. I have it because I'm a human being. So I have to train myself, and we have to help students do this, to ask the question, what am I missing? What do I not know about what this other person is sharing with me? And I think the curiosity is really, really critical, because if we're curious, then we'll seek to understand, we'll seek to learn more, rather than just accepting at face value what is. So I think that's part of the answer I would give to the question.
Shall I move on to the next one?
Yep.
Or
Is another one?
okay. The
If I
next,
can speak, yes.
absolutely, go ahead.
Perfect. As everyone was talking, I was like, I don't want to interrupt. I want to participate, but not to interrupt anyone. I totally agree with you, Norm. It's a matter of curiosity. Before Adrian spoke about the resources, about the innovation, this is one of my obsessions, because I think that if you don't innovate, you cannot surprise students, and if you surprise them, this is linked to what I asked before about the results. What I mean with results is I want my students to have the sensation that this is not a monologue, this is a class, this is something where they can participate, where they can feel, where they can say, wow, amazing, a video or whatever they mean. So what I wanted is like, how can I look for something that makes me connect with the students and say, this is the better result, that instead of learning just 20% of the lesson, that they memorize 40%, and then the 60. Obviously 100% is not possible, because that is a fantastic mind, but this is what I meant. What would you do to make more interactive? For example, I try to use a metaverse that I call a Leaderverse here in my academy, and those resources, what would you introduce to improve the results in the classes?
If I can speak, I think that what you need to do is to make the students co-creators with you, not you to give them the metaverse or whatever, but say how you would want to be taught, and try to be very humble like that, and say to put the curiosity, and give them the opportunity to say, okay, I want to learn like this, like with a video, or let's go and learn this class or this content in the field, or let's go to a museum. Maybe what I think that, or my humble opinion, can be, try to ask them how and what their problems or their challenges are with the subject that they are learning, and how they can be more participate, and how they can be the protagonist of the learning. As Adrian was saying, the student is in the center, and here at the school in Argentina, and what we try to do in the different activities is how the students can lead the activities, and maybe sometimes lead the classes, as the flipped classes, and how they can be their own educators, in a sense, with your guidance. But I think that's maybe a little bit about the answer. I don't know what maybe Adrian can think or not.
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree there. I mean, another word I don't think maybe we've said enough of. I mean, we've talked about curiosity, but also how that can be nurtured through a pedagogy really focused on inquiry, an inquiry Socratic sort of method to help sort of drive it. There's in terms of what does that look like in resources, there's a shout out, I suppose, if you look at the IB website, has significant resources in terms of professional development, including NanoPD, and also kind of what is a PYP classroom like, right? Or what is a middle years program like, and trying to get a sense of what the difference is there as well, in terms of that kind of pedagogy and how it can kind of come alive. But I think inquiry-led learning, so that focus on agency is a good orientation.
Thank you. I think we should move on to other questions as well, but I hope that helped you in understanding what you were trying to achieve. The next question is from another guest. She says, he says, loving the ideas for the future for older students. What are the future trends and ideas for early years and elementary primary students? Would anyone like to address that question?
Yeah, I can start if you want. I think that when we start in kindergarten, in K3, we look at the world in a holistic world and in a holistic way, and we learn by playing and by communicating, and sometimes in primary or afterwards in secondary, the world compartmentalized in different subjects, and sometimes we lose that holistic approach to education that we started in the kindergarten, and we start to compartmentalize our minds or teachers with the subjects and the curriculums. So I think that one of the trends that we are seeing is how we can make this, or the flow that is in for example in kindergarten with the different approaches of Montessori and Reggio Emilia, and how we can transcend that to primary and secondary and try to learn in a more interdisciplinary way, but not only as a project-based learning, but if not to have a different time frame of merge subjects, because in order to continue with that holistic approach, that is, I think, one of the ways to in elementary and kindergarten to start to show about the world and discuss, and not to wait to and discuss, of course, in each stage with their own pace. But I think that's one of the things that I have seen in education, that after kindergarten and then the early years of primary, we start to compartmentalize and put everything in boxes, and try not to do that, and have like a open room where we can have different places, as you know, the space is the third educator in a space of learning and enhancing the curiosity, as Adrian was saying. I think we can nurture that and have them since K2, K1 to K12.
Very nice, thank you. The next question, it says, we're heading towards becoming an IB recognized school. Do you have any advice that can help us transition smoothly as we shift our approach to the IB way? I guess Adrian was more likely.
I guess I'll I'll come in there. Just before I do, can I just say the last question related to the primary years, I really loved, and it's kind of so important, and maybe we haven't made enough reference actually to those early years in the PYP. And I just want to say, we were referencing inquiry, and the foundation of the PYP is around those units of inquiry. I mean, that's absolutely fundamental. And it's the school which is constructing with guidance those units of inquiry. And the program is delivered through transdisciplinary themes to help students sort of understand, reflect, and make connections. And so, those broad themes, and you think about, primary students in terms of who we are, where we are in place and time, how we express ourselves, how the world works, how we organize ourselves, and sharing the planet. So those themes are the bedrock around the inquiry and the foundation of how the program works. So, and I would say, and I'm sure many of my IB colleagues would agree, that as the middle years program and the diploma program have evolved, they've learnt from and applied principles from the PYP, actually. And the PYP is, I think it's exceptional, and I, really feel that primary schools with the impact of COVID were dramatically impacted in terms of the educators and students. That must have been extremely tough. Then we come to the question in terms of, thinking about becoming an IB school. What I would say is that as well as the support of colleagues, we have teams of people that can help guide. One of the first things that we ask schools to do as they're considering this is to work through a feasibility study. So the transition and change given it's a very different curriculum and different ways taught, we're really saying, because what the IB does is it authorizes schools to teach IB programs. It doesn't accredit schools, it authorizes them to teach those programs. And as such, we're talking about sustainability. We support the schools in understanding the standards and practices, that they've got a strong feasibility to sustain those programs, and working on the professional development of the leadership, the coordinator, and the faculty. And there's a lot of structured support there. We have, depending on where people are, in terms of representative in country or regional representatives who can provide contextual support and also connect you with other schools and communities who can show you what it's like. I think there's nothing better than visiting a school and sort of understanding the education and talking about that journey. But there's plenty of support, and I'd be very happy to follow up with that individual if they'd like to reach out to me. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to contribute?
I think Faith has his.
Yeah, I was going to add a little bit on the primary education question as well. I'm sure you're in very good hands with Adrian on the IB recognition, so I will not chime in much more on that. But I wanted to actually give a shout out on the PYP, Adrian, which you referenced there as well, right? All of the UWC schools are IB schools, and a few of them have the PYP program, especially in Asia, where we've got Singapore and Thailand as schools that educate in the younger years. And I've had a chance to visit both schools this year, and I could see kids from the age of 2 in UWC Thailand. I could see kids the age of 4 in UWC Southeast Asia in Singapore. And these kids are switched on. They're engaged, they're active, they're asking questions, which is not very typical compared with kids that I've seen in other schools. And one of the key areas of difference here is the fact, one, they introduced to a curriculum that's very open-ended, inquiry-based, etc., very, very early. The education is very tactile, again, which is not strange for good primary schools, elementary schools, but you see kids touching things, feeling things, engaging, stringing things together. You need to get kids on those things very, very early, and seeing it in practice is just mind-blowing. But more importantly for me, of course, outdoor education is also very, very core to what kids do. We want to get them on that path. But what I saw in practice in the schools as well is getting kids actively engaged in service from very, very young ages. Even when they're not doing things beyond the school campus, you've got kids who are given, little stumps to plant, and they've got a mangrove reforestation project going on. And the kids from the elementary school are there putting those things in the ground, and they're explaining what they're doing. And they know this is part of climate change, and they're making a difference. You're just getting those ideas in their minds very, very early. So all the things we talked about embedding in secondary education, you can bring all of them right back into primary education and early years education, and they don't lose any value. The earlier you get those kids embedded in the practices of sustainability and regeneration and sharing community and sharing stories, the better for every single one of us. So just think about bringing everything we talked about as relevant for secondary education, bring it earlier, and nothing is lost, everything is gained. And I've seen that in practice. It's top.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Can I just add to that? I think one of the important things about what we've just spoken about, which is just so right, is engaging with our parent community, so that our parent community understand what's happening for the learning of their children. Because if we don't do that, oftentimes children go home and parents will ask them questions or do things which actually undo all the things we've just spoken about. And if it's a true partnership, and it ought to be a true partnership, then we need to have parents on the same wavelength as us as teachers and learners. So, and I'm sure all schools try to do this, but it's just something that I'm very conscious of, because I've seen it in my own experience many times, this kind of disconnect between what happens here and what happens when you go there. So just, I think, a really critical piece of the jugsaw is just getting your parents in and helping them learn with you, actually help them learn with you on the journey. Yeah.
Thank you so much. 7:33, so I'm just trying, or in my time, it is, our time is running out, so I'm trying to get as many questions in as possible. The next question is quite interesting. It says, as stakeholders in international education, how influential have you been or can you be in helping teacher training institutions be more internationally minded and to prepare educators for the international classroom? Who would like to address that question?
I can kick off, and my colleagues can improve. A number of points linking, the influence. Let's look at the influence here. So, okay, let's look at this point. So, okay, the IB trains over 80,000 teachers per year. Okay, that's good, and we have a strong program of innovation, and we've got the IB conference coming next week in The Hague, where we're going to be launching sort of a new PD initiative to really connect professionals, their materials, and look at potentials for things like micro-credentialing. That's great. But then you get to this point about influence, more broadly. So I think there are two points here. One relates to strong research and working with partners in terms of research and the efficacy of the teacher training and the difference it makes. The other point is that I'm not sure if colleagues will be aware that the IB also offers the IB Educator Certificate. So we work with a number of teacher training institutes worldwide, which for both they have kind of, this sort of general degree and master's level. So this is for national or international teachers. So if you're thinking about the ecosystem in a country, then the IB Educator Center University, you think, we have, for example, one within Spain, it can also provide the teacher training qualification that those teachers leaving that university are IB trained and qualified and can go and teach the program straight away. So you're trying to work with national and international teacher training institutes worldwide. But that's fantastic, right? And that helps to scale, and we've got partners across the world that do that. What's also really interesting is that they are also research engines, and they're really interested in, the research and efficacy of what they're doing. And they're often, if you talk about George Mason, so George Mason University in Virginia in the US is also an IB Educator Center. And, it's as well as offering the program, supporting the teachers and the training and bring to the standard, it also works in international projects worldwide where it provides teacher training experience for those teachers in different countries worldwide, often in countries which are helping to develop their education system. So you get this seeding of the teachers, the reflective experience, the research. So I think something that we in the IB can think of with, just think about this question is, how can we further strengthen our research, professional development, and this network, which has got potential to do more to build that influence? Thank you.
Faith, would you like to address that question?
I'll just build a little bit on what Adrian's talked about, because again, the IB teacher training programs are fabulous. In practice, there's also been an example from within, again, the UWC network, which is easy to draw connection to. In Costa Rica, where you've got, Adrian might correct me, I think the second largest public education system where the IB is involved. I think Costa Rica is one of the countries where you have a lot of public IB schools in the national system. And the UWC in Costa Rica has then opened up its doors as part of a teacher training program, welcoming local teachers from within Costa Rican public schools to come to their college to get further development on how to teach the IB. There's an example of a proper partnership that's opened up spaces using existing spaces. And as the college is now building a new campus, there's a deliberate design to have a teacher training facility within the new campus for public schools to come into an international school to learn how to teach the IB in public schools. And I see that as very, very valuable, and it's something I'll be recommending for other international schools. As much as you can open up your doors to welcome teachers from the local environment, just to have that mind transformation of being in similar environments as other international teachers, seeing in practice what happens, allowing them to observe your classes. It's invaluable what it might do for a teacher and their confidence and the ability to further translate the ideas of proper international education into systems that are not designed for that.
I just want to, if I may, Edgardo, just add, because Faith is sort of stimulating all this thinking and helping me to kind of reflect on my own sort of experience and points. So, you know, one point here is the importance of language across everything that we do. And, you know, that if you take the primary years program, the middle years program, they can be taught in local languages. And we all value multilingualism. And the diploma as well has got lots of support for language and language assessment. I want to make a shout out also for the Francophonie community worldwide. And we've worked with partners, for example, and ENCO Education within Africa to really help to grow and sustain schools across Africa, particularly in Francophone countries. And a big shout out, you know, talk about Costa Rica. We have a number of colleagues here, I think from Spain or from Spanish language kind of context. So, you know, Costa Rica, I mean, the ministry in Costa Rica has been, you know, so supportive and a really good partner to that and helping sustain it. We have within Peru, you know, their IB diploma within the boarding schools, the public school, you know, the state school boarding schools within Peru, or the work that's been done, you know, within Argentina or Ecuador, and then as well as Spain itself, where we've had very substantial support from state schools and state school actors. So it's a multilingual endeavor. And I think that's really worth saying. And I kind of appreciate the diversity of people on the call.
Norm,
No,
would
just
you-
to add, Norm was one. No, just to add a short thing about sometimes how do you make the curiosity for a local teacher or a teacher that only gives the national curriculum. How do you help them to think, to say, how can I be more international? And how can I teach kids different things? So what we do, and in connection with the other question that we always think about a lot of activities for secondary students, we started thinking about these joint projects for the elementary student and the kindergarten students. So what we told teachers said, just think in something simple. For example, for the kids, what plants do you plant? What aromatic plants are you planting in Colombia, and what are you planting in Spain, for example? And we did a joint project for kids of K5 that say, okay, in Spain they plant mint and whatever, and in Colombia they plant different things. And they go back home and say, no, today I have a meeting with kids in Spain, or today I have a meeting with kids in Colombia, 5-year-olds, and just that experience of the exchange of which plants or which food they eat there and they eat here, that's just thinking internationally and broadening. So maybe a teacher in a kindergarten teacher just start small, and then you can build from that. I think that's sometimes, of course, the whole teaching the international curriculums is like the higher level, but when we have some schools that cannot access to that, they say, how can we start? Just make today we have the technology to make a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Teams meeting, and just start like that, just to share that small experience. And I think that's very valuable for kids, for K5 kids, or for kids in elementary schools. And also, as Faith was saying, the service to make international creativity action service, and say, how can we do a project, an international project, in giving service to our organization or a community, or just an idea, or and that engage a lot of students. The service, to put service at a very young age. So we have the CAS, like from kindergarten to K-12, and I think that's very valuable. And then we can have interdisciplinary within the schools, where, for example, a CAS program would be for a 5th-year-old student of K-12 to give their time and space to go and read books, for example, for K-3, and that's putting your service and your time and your presence and leading as an example. So I think for just to merge those questions.
Very nice. The last question, since our time is ticking, where do you think the future of education is going? That's a huge one.
That's $1 million question, Noreen.
Exactly.
If I may, I can start or just a little reflection. I think that the future of education is as with the students making their own education, like trying to have schools open with international curriculums and give different services and different options, and then they can choose. For example, if we have like to make an analogy, like a Netflix of education, and then I want this, and this, and we as a school have to try to, of course, with the proper availability and a proper quorum for those subjects, but try to give them their own opportunity to create or co-create their education. Try to have some core, of course, subjects and core learning, but then for them to choose, I think that we are going that way in order to that the kids can start planning their student journey, or at least, for example, our kids here in Argentina, that they are leaving school, they say, I want that the kids in the generation to come, that they are now in K1, to pass through these student journeys, these experiences, these trips, this communication with the outward, these experiences of learning outdoor. So they are co-creating with us what experiences they passed through and they were okay, but what experiences they think that the other kids that come from other generations should pass, not only through the schools, but through their learning. And the learning, as Norm was saying, I think is much more outside the school. Is the community, is the parents, is the teachers, is the whole neighborhood maybe. And I think that's where future education is going, and I believe, and I try to believe, and I hope that we go to also to this understanding and in an education for peace and understanding and accepting other cultures, religions, and other people that live in the world, and also being more sustainable in all the ways possible.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Edgardo. I think that children have to be co-creators, and at the same time, I would add 3 more things. I would add that they need to learn how to think, because many times I see that education is memory. Obviously, it is, but you need to learn how to think, because if you try to do this, you're going to learn in a better way. And I would add two basic subjects that for me represent the future, that are robotics and programming. I can see many times, and I feel envy, because I have just started my project, my academy. Obviously, it's a very low level, but you never know what's going to happen in the future. And I have envy. I feel envy for you when you speak about international baccalaureate, when you speak about international education, and I say, wow, I can see some institutions, some schools here in Spain that are beginning with scratch, with things related to robotic and programming, and I feel a lot of envy, because the future, I think, is there.
Thank you. Norm, would you like to answer the question?
I'll give a view. I think, yeah, look, I obviously agree with what Edgardo's said generally, but I guess my thought is we need to be conscious of the fact that we're probably thinking from a privileged view of this. I guess we're thinking of a privileged view, and not every child in the world, every community in the world has technology, nor has the capacity to do a lot of the things that we've been talking about. So I think I would just say, I think what we need to be cognizant of as we get excited about the future and the potential, all the things that are great about what it will look like, is that we need to be somehow open to looking out for others who are less fortunate than we are and our schools are, and trying to close that, that gap. I was thinking about this when Adrian was talking about the inquiry in the PYP, that I was in a third world country not that long back. I saw a magnificent lesson given by a teacher under a freeway, right? But the way in which this teacher engaged the students was absolutely magnificent, but a completely different world to the world in which I generally habitate. So, yeah, so all I'm saying, I think what Edward, I think correct, I think that's right, but we just need to be mindful that there's a whole swathe of humanity that we need to kind of reach out to and try and bring along with us as best we can. Yeah.
Thank you. And Faith, would you like to contribute to that question?
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with just what's been shared already. But in terms of where things are going and where they should be going, I think that education is becoming increasingly conscious of society's needs and needs to continue on that path, that we must connect what we do in the classrooms to the needs of society and opportunities as they emerge. We're not disconnected from society around us, and students must not be disconnected from society. So the more we connect what we do in the classroom to the needs and opportunities of society, I think we have a chance to do a lot better. Secondly, for me, well-being has become an increasing fixture on our discussions around education, and it has to continue to be. We cannot other people who have needs and challenges around us. We have to embed well-being at the core of what we do, and I see that being a growing presence, and I'm really pleased to see that, and long may that continue. Thirdly, I think education is becoming increasingly mindful of differences, especially learning differences, and needs to continue to be as such, that we do not again separate people who don't look like us. I like what Adrian talked about, and it features quite prominently on the IB's descriptions as well, that you can be, especially when you think about engagements and conversations, that people can be right in different ways, right? And you don't think of someone as different from you as being wrong. So education, I see, is becoming very mindful of differences and incorporates people a lot more today. And lastly, just to stress on technology itself, the technology must be seen as an enabler rather than the definition of education. Technology enables things, makes things a little bit better, but we can't define the future of education as tech-driven. Tech has to be something that helps us arrive at a destination that we want to arrive at, we think we can help people arrive at together. So lots to take away from this, but I'm really just pleased to see lots of friends and colleagues from different parts of the world on the conversation as well. So thanks to everyone who's been a part of this.
Absolutely.
Adrian?
Yeah, just very, very, very briefly, I really want to chime in with what Faith has just said there, that technology and data is a tool. I think it's very exciting in terms of how that will help us improve, the modality, how teaching, how people can access education and teaching and provide more kind of outreach to students much more widely than through conventionally coming into a school. So the modality, the technology is interesting. The future of education is a perpetual question that in a way we don't know. There are certain themes, agency we've spoken about. And I think just one thought would be, in a way, we talked about how our programs have learned from primary. When you look at how education is going, just think about how much adult learning has changed. So,
Yes.
Not that long ago, adult learning within an organization would be you were given certain courses and you did them. You went on a 2-day retreat, you did your course, and that was it. And it was all programmed out for you. And now we as adult learners have the agency, and not only in terms of what we want to study in terms of our own development, but also how we want to study. Is it a full certificated course? Is it nano PD? So that the pace, the outcome, the depth is really there, and the way you connect people through that learning. So, and I think as a theme, as adults, we're trying to build an adaptive capacity in the way that we understand and work, and it's how we can nurture that, I think, will be an important theme in terms of education and helping to continue to enable students to achieve their optimum.
Okay. I think we have a few minutes left, And maybe I'd like to just kind of pull this all together, so to speak. I noticed there's a theme. A lot of the words are very clear. We've used the word outreach, alliance, united, international, understanding, co-create, interconnected. I mean, everything is pointing to a direction where we need to collaborate as educators, as organizations. We each have a strong understanding of the value of developing education for peace in order to have a more sustainable future. And when all corners of the world have been experiencing political, economic, social, and educational instability or strife, our mission as educational organizations is extremely important at this point. Our discussions today in the present, encompassing the past and looking ahead to the future of international education, are certainly relevant and necessary to meet the needs of what's going on in this world. And on behalf of the International Schools Association, we'd like to sincerely thank Adrian Carney from the International Baccalaureate, Norm Dean from the Alliance for International Education, and Faith Abiadun from the United World Colleges for their presentations on this discussion. And thank you so much for all of you who participated today and just showered us with these wonderful questions. And we look forward for this very, very important discussion to continue. Edgardo, I don't know if you'd like to add anything else or any.
No, just to thank Faith, Norman, and Adrian. It was difficult to put this together, but we put it, and here it is. And I think that this is the starting point of collaboration between us and also between the attendants that are here, and try to, between the four of us and also a lot of educators around the world, to co-construct the future together with the students. Of course, the students should be the protagonists of this movement, and try to continue doing things and collaborations within these organizations. I think this is the starting point of how interdependent and how connected we are, and how we can give service to students, to parents, and to teachers in order to make a better international education for the future. So thank you, the three of you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, the audience, for being here for around 2 hours. Thank you for your patience and your amazing questions. Thank you.